Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive, counting down 10 rigorously sourced facts that are going to absolutely bust the myths you might believe about one of the world's most iconic dinosaurs, the Stegosaurus.
But hey, first, I really gotta ask, how well do you actually know this guy? Like when you picture a Stegosaurus in your head, do you see the classic pop culture version? You know, the solitary, tiny-brained, super heavily armored tank just kind of lumbering alone through the Jurassic swamps? Well, get ready to have that entire image shattered.
Okay, let's dive into this. Take a look at this iconic composite Stegosaurus mount from the Yale Peabody Museum. This was put up way back in 1910, and for literal generations, this right here was the absolute gold standard for how we pictured the animal. But, as we're going to see today, paleontology is an ever-evolving science. Our understanding has shifted drastically since this skeleton was first pieced together over a century ago.
Section 1. Bone Wars and Bizarre Beginnings.
So, to figure out where all these myths even started, we have to travel back to the infamous, honestly kind of ruthless 1877 Bone Wars between rival paleontologists. In a dead sprint to outdiscover each other, O.C. Marsh made some, let's just say hasty theories. Which brings us to our first two facts. Fact 1, when Marsh first discovered Stegosaurus, he actually thought it was an aquatic turtle. No joke, he assumed those massive plates formed a flat, shell-like carapace over its back, which actually is where the name Stegosaurus, meaning roofed lizard, comes from. In fact 2, Marsh later argued that the Stegosaurus walked on two legs. Because its hind limbs were so much longer than its front ones, he genuinely believed it moved bipedally, only dropping down to all fours every now and then.
Section 2. Mythical brains and bipedal postures. Okay, so the two-legged theory was eventually totally debunked, thankfully. But another, even wilder myth took its place. I want you to imagine a massive 5 to 10-ton body, supposedly controlled by a brain the size of a walnut, literally weighing about 2 ounces. That mind-boggling ratio led to fact 3, the famous second brain, or as some call it, the bunk brain. Because early scientists found this enlarged, hollow space in the hip region of the spinal cord, they just assumed it must house a second brain to control the back half of the animal. But the reality? Modern birds, which are the closest living relative to dinosaurs, have a very similar hollow feature called a glycogen body. It's used for energy storage or maybe balance. It is definitely not used for thinking. So yeah, the butt brain, pure myth.
Section 3. Decoding the famous plates. So, what about the dinosaur's most famous feature? Scientists debated the exact arrangement of those backplates for well over a century. You can see the historical Sarah Mount here alongside the Lily fossil from the Saurier Museum Athol in Switzerland. Which brings us to fact 4. If you look closely at Lily, which was preserved in situ, meaning exactly as she died in the rock, you'll see the plates didn't run in a single straight line. And they weren't perfectly paired side by side either. Actually, they grew in 2 alternating rows, staggering beautifully right down the animal's back.
But what were those plates actually for? Well, fact 5. They were very likely used for sexual display, not armor. And fact 6. They were covered in keratin, not just bare bone. See, studies of the microscopic bone structure show us that these plates were highly vascular, meaning they were absolutely packed with blood vessels. But they were incredibly fragile. They left the dinosaur's flanks completely exposed to predators. So rather than being defensive armor or even solar panels for thermal regulation, the current scientific consensus suggests they were probably brightly colored keratin-covered billboards. They might have even flushed with blood to attract mates or just recognize their own species. Pretty wild, right?
Section 4. Thagomisers and social herds.
All right, moving down to the dangerous end of the dinosaur, we arrive at fact 7, the thagomiser. I absolutely love this fact because it's a legitimate, peer-reviewed scientific term that was named entirely after a joke in a 1982 The Far Side comic strip. A thagomiser is the arrangement of spikes on the tail. And contrary to the 8 vertical spikes you might have seen on that historic 1910 Yale mount earlier, in situ fossils prove they actually only had 4 spikes. And they projected horizontally outward, not straight up.
Which brings us right to fact 8, the thagomiser was a genuinely deadly weapon. We know for sure this wasn't just for show. Paleontologists have actually found a damaged Allosaurus bone. And remember, that was a massive apex predator of the time with a puncture wound that perfectly, and I mean perfectly, matches a Stegosaurus tail spike. That is direct fossil evidence the Stegosaurus swung its tail with devastating defensive force to protect itself.
Next up, fact 9. New trackways show they moved in herds. This completely busts the lonely dinosaur myth wide open. A really fascinating 2024 study of fossilized footprints from the Iberian Peninsula showed numerous parallel trackways traveling in the exact same direction at the exact same pace. This proves they walked in coordinated, parallel groups. They were social animals with complex behavioral patterns, not just solitary wanderers out there on their own.
Section 5. A very quiet extinction.
So, that leads us to the ultimate end of the Stegosaurus. And this is honestly perhaps the most mind-bending fact of this entire explainer. 84 million. Fact 10. The Stegosaurus went extinct a massive 84 million years before the famous asteroid hit Earth. Yep, it was not wiped out in the fiery apocalypse that we typically associate with the death of the dinosaurs. If we look at the timeline of the Mesozoic era, around 150 million years ago, the Stegosaurus simply faded out quietly during a gradual late Jurassic faunal turnover. It was eventually replaced ecologically by other armored herbivores like Ankylosaurs. But just think about the immense scale here. The T-Rex lived between 68 and 66 million years ago. That literally means a Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer in time to humans sitting here today than it did to a living Stegosaurus. Let that sink in for a second. Which leaves us with this thought. How does the vastness of deep time change your view of the Mesozoic era? It is just incredible to think about the immense, almost incomprehensible scale of prehistoric life, and how constantly evolving our understanding of paleontology really is. The Stegosaurus wasn't some slow, lonely, aquatic turtle. It was a dynamic, social, beautifully adorned survivor of a world unimaginably distant from our own. Keep questioning what you think you know, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.